Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first is with reference to the political developments within the country, particularly the PTI chairman's letter to the president, in which he once again asked for an immediate inquiry into the former chief of army staff, again citing references of a column that was released on February 9th, where he argues that the chief of army staff, the previous chief of army staff, has apparently confessed to his involvement in the political affairs of the country, and also, of course, pertaining to the ouster of the former prime minister. And he has referred to four such incidents and reasons, citing the fact that there needs to be an internal inquiry and that the president should uphold the constitution and make sure that since the army and the institutions are also below the constitution, they need to be accountable as well. This, of course, is coming in the aftermath of the PTI chairman's statements of the former army chief, also in an interview with Voice of America, and then in a recent televised address as well. At the same time, there's also the development of a release of another audio leak. This time, this featured the former chief minister of Punjab, Pervez Elahi, where he speaks to with regards to the appointment of a particular judge with reference to certain cases being fixed towards him. And of course, the Interior Minister Rana Sanga in a press conference later talked about how this is something that needs to be investigated and a forensic analysis needs to be done so that action can be taken and Pervez Elahi can be held accountable for his involvement with regards to intervening with the affairs of the judiciary, and also, of course, with regards to different cases pertaining within the audio leaks. So we're going to be taking a look at both these developments in our first segment of the show today and try to understand the legalities of these audio leaks, and then, of course, the demand of an inquiry into the former army chief. Now we're also going to be, of course, taking a look at what this means in terms of the way that the current political setup will respond to these statements and developments, since we've seen in the past as well that there have been many audio leaks, many statements coming in from the PTI chairman, but there hasn't been any consequence or action taken so far. We're also going to be looking at this in light of the refusal by the Lahore High Court of protective bail to the PTI chairman, something that he asked after the ATC in Islamabad also rejected that. And then, of course, the fact that this was the 10th time that the court had asked for the in-person appearance, which the former prime minister and the PTI chairman did not respect. So what does that mean also in terms of these particular cases? We'll focus on in our discussion in the first segment. In our next one, we're going to be taking a look at what has been going on for the past 3 consecutive days in India. The raiding of the BBC offices within the country by the tax authorities in India. Later, of course, this is something that the authorities have said is part of the regular proceedings, but of course it has been linked with the Modi question, a documentary that the BBC had released, which was stopped from releasing within India, but of course found its way to the public. And then, of course, other measures have also been taken to curtail its spread, including, of course, bringing into the websites and other platforms such as Twitter and YouTube, who did concede to the demands. Of course, this linkage is being denied by the authorities, but there's a lot of question and talk with regards to the freedom of press within the country, and the opposition parties also claiming that this is a brazen attack on the freedom of media and the protection of organizations who talk about the objective analysis of what is going on, including foreign media. So that is going to be what we'll talk about at the end of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi, and we've been joined online for our first segment by Barrister Safi Ghauri, who's a legal expert. Thank you very much, Barrister Safi, for joining us and being a part of the debate. And let's start with you when we take a look at, firstly, the PTI chairman's demand from the president regarding an inquiry into the former chief of army staff. This is something that he has mentioned in a recent interview on a televised address and now in a letter to the president. What sort of grounds do you think exist? Of course, there have been 4 reasons that the PTI chairman has cited, but do any of these fall in terms of any evidence or any sort of basis for the president to even take part in this inquiry? And what sort of response do you think does such a letter coming in from a former prime minister or the leader of the party warrant by the president?
Thank you, Sana. So I think the president should immediately inform Imran Khan that in Pakistan there is a parliamentary system wherein the power vests with the prime minister and not the president. The president of Pakistan is the head of the state. He is the head of the armed forces, but it is only a titular role, and he is bound to act on the advice of the prime minister and may not initiate different matters on his own accord. Article 46 of the constitution makes it abundantly clear that it is the president's duty to obey what the prime minister says and act only on the advice of the prime minister. Imran Khan, being a former prime minister himself, should know as much. But regardless of the fact that he has approached the wrong person with the wrong set of powers, the fact that these allegations do not in themselves contain anything that would be deemed meritorious in perhaps any judicial forum. One of the accusations is that he spoke to a vlogger. I don't know who that vlogger is, probably a famous vlogger. But if General Bajwa spoke to a vlogger and the vlogger then stated, this statement in itself is hearsay, has no legal validity. The other two paragraphs are about his interview with Javed Chaudhry. Once again, the Supreme Court of Pakistan and various other courts have held that matters stated in interviews, unless they are treasonous in their nature, do not constitute any particular crime and are merely the opinions of a person. Now, if General Bajwa in his interview with Javed Chaudhry did say something that could be deemed treasonous, then Article 6 proceedings should be brought up against him, and Imran Khan should approach the courts of law, not the President of Pakistan, who does not have the power to initiate Article 6 proceedings. However, short of that, stating that somebody said something distasteful in a TV interview is not within the purview of the president. And I think Imran Khan should, having served as the prime minister, once again realize that. And please do remind me what the fourth point was. There was one about a vlogger, two paragraphs about Javed Chaudhry. Is there one that I'm forgetting amongst the four paras that were alleged? Do you recall, Sana?
Right, so there were 4
Ukraine.
points with regards to what the PTI chairman said. Of course, there was the reference with reference to the column by Javed Chaudhry. Then there was, of course, the involvement with regards to the PTI chairman being called dangerous in terms of what he said, that this is why he got involved. There was also the case with the NAP that was pointed out with regards to Shaukat
Shaukat
Tareen.
Tareen.
And then there was also,
Ukraine.
of course, the vlogger that you mentioned, which I believe was
Yeah,
by
and
the
I
name
remember
of Mr. Aftab Iqbal.
last one.
And Ukraine also.
The last.
Yes, the
Yeah,
international
Ukraine. The
conference.
Ukraine.
Yes.
The first two paras were about his interview with Javed Chaudhry. Once again, as stated, those could be easily brushed aside by any court of law as being personal opinions. Would not hold much ground at all unless any proper evidence was brought forward in that regard. Especially because these are the words of a retired general. He wasn't even serving when such an interview was given. Regarding the hearsay from a vlogger, that's not even, we don't even have anything on record that General Bajwa said anything. The last thing that he said is something that I feel is worth looking into, which is his allegation that General Bajwa tried to dissuade Imran Khan from having a neutral perspective on the Russia-Ukraine matter. I've once again found that a little funny because he said that he had taken his advice from retired diplomats. In that, I don't understand why he would take advice from retired diplomats and not serving diplomats or even the armed forces. Since there is a war going on, he's bound to take advice from his own armed forces and see what action needs to be taken, since the armed forces are bound to protect the sovereignty, the territory, and the security of Pakistan. Any of these things
Right,
might
but
have an impact.
what the PTI chairman mentions is the fact that the former chief of army staff turned away from the agreed stance in an international conference where he moved away from the stance of neutrality, which is what is being referred to as something by the PTI chairman that
This is
qualifies an investigation.
Yeah, unfortunately, and this is something that we have seen happening in Pakistan's history in many instances, where generals have taken a stance different from those of elected prime ministers. And once again, not that I agree with it, but the constitution has provisions which allow the armed forces to disagree when there is an instance of security. when we have the security of a country involved, then the armed forces is well within its purview to take a different approach. This is not a matter of diplomacy. This is a matter of security, in my opinion. And I think General Bajwa would have a very fair ground if he were to defend himself on that, because at the end of the day, neutrality at a time when any of these wars could have a spillover effect in Pakistan may not be best suited to Pakistan. Once again, I am not an expert on this.
Okay.
I don't know what people
Sure.
should take,
Farooq,
but I do believe that if it
right.
comes
Right. Let me also take
uh,
Farooq's opinion on that. And Farooq, let me put forward two questions. First, with reference to, of course, the issue of the legality and, of course, the purview of the president, as Barrister Safi was pointing out, is an important aspect of the value of this letter. But irrespective of that, do you think that this letter can possibly achieve anything in terms of what the PTI chairman is talking about? And secondly, with reference to the stance on Ukraine, can this be something that is acceptable for an army chief to present a stance different from that of the prime minister of a country?
Right, Sana, this is quite intriguing because first of all, I was looking at the letter, and the methods of that letter are also interesting. I will be talking about that in a bit as well. But first of all, as was pointed out by Barrister Safi, that the president's office has titular powers. And as such, after 18th Amendment, the presidency does not have any agency in such matter on its own. So because of that, what exactly does a former prime minister seek to achieve? My belief would be that there are three layers to it. One, of course, to keep their own president or the president they think they installed, keep him under pressure. The second would be to actually write this letter and then actually issue it immediately to the press so that the media can keep on talking about these matters no matter what. Third, to actually use it as a placeholder. If you know about internal mythology of PTI, they believe that whenever elections take place, they are going to swarm the electorate, and then they are going to have more than two-thirds majority in the parliament. And after that, of course, as the story goes, usually it is linear. One thing falls apart, everything falls apart. But then Imran Khan Sahab will choose to become the president or install Islamic presidential system, which is akin to what we call caliphate. And then he can use all these letters lying in that office to prosecute whosoever he wants. So my understanding is that these three are the reasons, because as such, the president can only write a letter to various institutions and it would achieve nothing. Having said that, let me also look at the merits, and particularly your question about Ukraine. The situation in which this statement or this speech was given was not a policy speech. It was not actually addressed to the nation. It was not a press conference called for public consumption. It was a security dialogue. And in that security dialogue, all over the world, army chiefs have the habit of declaring statements or offering their opinion. And usually the environment is quite candid. So I believe that the former army chief was within his rights to make that statement, although Imran Khan Sahab can actually react to that. He could have reacted to that the way President Obama reacted to General McChrystal when he gave that Rolling Stone article. But in Pakistan, we have this mixed history of civil-military relations, so naturally it was never pressed when he was in power. Having said that, let me also remind you that I'm not a card-carrying member of Bajwa fan club, right? There's a reason why Bajwa Sahab is talking to certain journalists, and even though I have had interactions with him in the past, I am not one of them. I think that at this moment, what the method he is using to actually offer these interviews exploits a kind of lacuna in the law. Usually, if you remember, a journal officer, when he retires, has to actually keep his peace for a given time, 1 year, 2 years, right? And at that time, he is not supposed to give any interviews, appear on television, take part in politics or any kind of public, office race or anything of that sort. So at this moment, what the former army chief is doing is actually meeting people and talking to them, and then allowing them to actually go and publish whatever he's saying. So that is a way of actually undercutting the whole argument about the law. But I think that in the future, gradually as these lacunas actually get exposed, they will be papered over, they will be taken care of, and they will be closed. Now, I totally get the point about investigation. As I said earlier, I'm not a card-carrying member of any fan club of anybody, particularly General Bajwa. The only reason I have kept my restraint and I usually avoid discussing these things is out of regard for the very same law that a person cannot respond to me. That's why I should not actually be talking about these things. But there are things that I wrote at that time when the journal was in office, so I'm going to repeat that. There are three things in which we need an answer. And there's a reason why Imran Khan Sahab has not actually highlighted them. One, the economic performance of the country. For 6 years, General Bajwa, when he was army chief, our finance ministers kept on changing. And Imran Khan Sahab even went to the extent of including General Bajwa in an economic council, right? And that was a shocker for me. I don't know why an army chief would need to be there. But the problem is that we have been told that because of him, the economy got the kind of relief that we got. The only problem is today when I look at the fundamentals of economy, I see that economy is in dire straits. So, marz badhta gaya, junju dawaki. The second aspect that is Imran Khan Sahab is very keen on actually talking about is NRO. So let me also give you an example of an NRO that Imran Khan Sahab himself received, and that was Farrukh Shahzadi. When Imran Khan Sahab was being removed, she quietly actually boarded a chartered plane and left the country. We know that the kind of powers that General Bajwa could have used at that time, had he wanted, she would have been stopped, right? The third one that I kept on writing even when he was at the top of his power was Afghan, particularly this negotiations with TTP. And I kept on posing it to thin nail, and I think we need an answer. But because Imran Khan Sahab is complicit in all these things, he will never ask you to ask these questions, right? If you have to begin with how Imran Khan Sahab actually ended up being in power. Right. So right now, I think that the man is under. He cannot speak directly to the media. So we should not be actually doing it. But I pointed out those things that I had written during his tenure. So I think that that merited some kind of addressing as well.
Sure. Barrister Safi, dear, you also talked about, of course, that the former Prime Minister should know what is going on and, of course, what the President can or cannot do. And you're also a political analyst. So let me also ask you with regards to, of course, the objective then, because it seems that perhaps the former Prime Minister does know this, and what he's trying to achieve from the letter may be something else, especially in terms of how he is being credited for talking against the establishment or talking about the institutions in a way which has resulted in the public also perhaps responding in a manner that they haven't done so in the past, or even some facets within the institution as well. And then, of course, to have written a letter against a former army chief seems to be something that he can play and talk about proudly.
Right. So, and there's a very simple reason why he can do this against the former army chief, but not against the United States of America. Because earlier, when he was dethroned from his power, he started blaming two people, the army chief and, of course, the USA. Now he's backtracked on the US because the US is still there, but the army chief is no longer there. He's sitting in Dubai, unable to participate in anything, as was just pointed out by Farrukh Pitafi Saab. He's a sitting duck, can't fight back, and that's why it makes him a very easy target for Imran Khan. He can now pin all the blame on General Qamar Javed Bajwa, continue to try and prosecute him, file complaints and allegations against him, and he knows very well that General Bajwa, who's sitting in Dubai, is not even going to answer in Pakistan. He's not going to answer, firstly because of the kind of discipline that the armed forces maintain, but also, and very unfortunately, because of his own behavior of having left Pakistan at a time when I believe the general should have stayed in Pakistan and at least bore the brunt of the consequences of whatever he has done. And since it's very obvious now that he is persona non grata on all sides of the political spectrum, it's not just PTI but other parties as well, who now think of him as you know as a person who was involved in some unsavory activities in the last couple of years, and he's just chosen to run away from all of those. So gives Imran Khan the perfect opportunity to pin the blame and try and suggest that he did not have any faults. It was all Qamar Javed Bajwa. At this stage, of course, I want to remind any viewers who are watching who are PTI fans that this is the very general whom Imran Khan stated publicly as being the most pro-democracy general Pakistan has ever seen. And this is the very same general Imran Khan said is the most just general Pakistan has ever seen, by stating that his justice is obvious by the fact that Nawaz Sharif
Just
was
and
convicted
democratic.
and
Just and
just and
democratic.
democratic. And yes, and these are the two terms Imran Khan himself has used for General Kamal Javed Bajwa. And so times change, and suddenly we see we see
Right.
Kamal Javed Bajwa as the most
But
unjust and the
but
most
Barrister Safi, there have been numerous things that the former Prime Minister has said and then not said, and then of course said differently. So this is just perhaps one of those. There is also, Farrukh, to take a look at the audio leak with regards to the former Chief Minister as well of Punjab, and we've seen that there is some talk with regards to the involvement in judicial affairs, particularly of fixing certain cases with a certain judge, something that the Interior Minister has taken note of and has asked for a forensic analysis. And I'll come to Barrister Safi later on regarding its legal value. But in terms of the way that audio leaks in the past have also influenced the narrative in terms of the political discussions, how much of an impact do you think this particular audio leak will have, and what sort of consequence will there exist, since there have been numerous others and perhaps graver ones in the past by people, including the PTI chairman, but nothing has happened with regards to that.
Right, Sana, there's a reason why I would be very reluctant to talk about this issue.
Okay.
Because, the one of the person involved is a sitting judge, right? A justice, actually, no less. So I have to be very careful about this. But in the end, you said that the leaks have actually influenced the country's politics or narratives. With due respect, if anything is certain, it is that these leaks, with the exception of the private leaks that came from Khan Sahab and were actually really damaging. Apart from that, these leaks have failed to actually do their part in shaping or reshaping narratives, or for that matter, discourse.
Okay.
Don't go by the debate on media, because media in Pakistan is, I think, at this moment punch drunk, and it doesn't know how to handle these issues, so it keeps on going and going in circles. Regarding these leaks, after all, it actually points to the same thing that I was pointing to yesterday. When the rule of law, when the word of law, when the idea of, bylaws that are there in the game, they weaken, then what remains there? Familial relations, acquaintances, privilege and power. And this is my concern, that if a weakling, does something wrong, in the end, they find themselves before law in a very non-negotiable position. But when there is someone who is powerful, influential, wealthy, or strong, they get whatever they want. I gave you example of Imran Khan Sahab yesterday, but again, a huge problem within the past 1.5 year has been regarding the decisions of the honorable judiciary and the way they were reached. So there too, I thought that there were moments when I could not actually relate those interpretations with the word of law itself. For example, when disqualification decision was taken, that they will be deseated and their votes will not be counted either, right? And the kind of interpretation was given, I've actually explained to you in detail how I had problem with that judgment, because when you actually relate to the British system or anything else, there the system is of proportional representation. In this country, in Pakistan, any MNA, any MPA who wins a seat, usually, provided that is not on a special seat, they win through something else. They win through their own capacity, their own social standing and money. So you cannot apply that principle on this. So my issue was that somehow there was some kind of weak interpretation of or understanding of law, and I keep on saying that. In the end, again, regardless of who is involved, I think these leaks should be investigated, whether there is actually any semblance of involvement of any person that is being mentioned in that clip. But having said that, it proves the same point that I've been making. And that short of rule of law, what remains is individual power and a state that only sees power because the bullies then can hurt you and then you have to concede ground.
Right. Barrister Safi, the Interior Minister, has of course asked for the investigation, and he's also asked for forensic analysis. But of course, in the numerous audio leaks in the past, I remember we also spoke in a show with regards to the legal value of audio leaks being presented in court. And so when we take a look at this particular audio leak as well and the emphasis on investigation, how is it going to pan out in a court in terms of any action being taken against the former CM or anyone else involved as part of this audio leak? Barrister Safi, we'll try and get connected with you once again and hopefully get to a bit more depth with regards to this particular issue with the audio leak. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you get the question?
Okay. I did get the question.
All right.
Right. So this particular issue is double-sided, and this in fact can have a legal ramification. Now, earlier maintained that these audio leaks do not have any legal or will not be upheld in the courts for a variety of reasons. The primary reason being the Electronic Transactions Ordinance, which states that any leak, for it to be considered evidence, has to have certain criterions, such as we need to know the source, the person who has presented the leak, recorded the leak, needs to come forward. We need to prove that it is not cut, that it is whole, and we also need to prove that it is in no manner tampered with. So it is in fact the leak itself, and no words have been changed, no additions or subtractions have been made. So it's a variety of things of this sort that various Supreme Court judgments have upheld, which make electronic evidence of audio files that come from anonymous sources very difficult to be held as evidence in light of Section 164 of Qanun-e-Shahadat Ordinance and of course the Electronic Transactions Ordinance. But this one leak has something very interesting in it, and the crime is. And this particular crime is contempt of court. To talk about a judge and to talk placing a judge in and in a leak where the content itself may not matter, whether the judge could have been placed or not placed, that's irrelevant. Whether that leak is admitted is what is the most relevant thing here. If it is somehow proven that it was in fact Chaudhry Pervez Elahi himself whose leak it is, and if it can be proven that it is his voice and that he is the one who said it, regardless of what the content is, without getting into the details of the larger question of what a travesty of justice it would have been had judges been placed on somebody's instructions. That case might never open up. But the case of him telling someone that he can appoint a judge of his own accord is still contempt of court, and that's something that's very well within reach in this case. So I feel like this is something that could happen, and it's not just the the investigating agencies. I think the Supreme Court itself might feel that its honor and its privilege as being the Supreme Court of Pakistan might get affected, and they might want to carry out an investigation into this moving forward. So let's
Right.
keep our eyes and ears open. I feel like this will have at least one more avenue that opens up, because the
Right.
judiciary of Pakistan is very clear on the kind of impression that they want to maintain before the general public.
Right, and I'll talk about that as well, but I just want to also understand with regards to the issue of forensic analysis and, of course, the ability to prove that this is in fact the CM, how much of credible capability exists here, and of course the kind of filters that also exist with regards to political incentives or other interests that also pass through any such investigations or the results that come forward. How will we be able to surely say and guarantee that the analysis is complete and accurate?
A very good question. So as far as, so once again, I stated earlier, there are the contents of the leak, and those contents are next to impossible to prove. For somebody to try and suggest that they can trace out where this came from, who was the one recording it, what device it was recorded on, when this was said, if any tampering or additions or subtractions have been made, these things are close to impossible. But for you to understand that this was Chaudhry Pervez Elahi himself is fairly easy technologically. This level of technology is something that the FIA possesses, and this level of technology is something that I myself have in fact given to the court in the past to try and prove that a voice recording was that of a person themselves. It's fairly easy to match voice frequencies, and a report to only that extent, a report only to the extent that yes, the voice in the leak is that of Chaudhry Pervez Elahi can be given. If such a report were to be given, that in itself would open up another avenue of contempt that perhaps otherwise might not occur with the content if the contents of the leak were seen in their entirety.
All right. Farrukh, when you take a look at this issue and what Barrister Safi was saying with regards to the impression that judiciary has, of course, there's also the added perception with regards to the treatment being given to the former Prime Minister, the PTI chairman. But we know also that the Lahore High Court has also dismissed his plea for protective bail. And then, of course, the anti-terrorism court within Islamabad has also asked for an in-person appearance. And we were discussing just yesterday that even though, of course, this points towards the previous asks of about 10 times that he was asked to appear in court, at least for now, this is something that is happening with reference to no extraordinary measure given to the former Prime Minister. But in terms of all of these different cases against the PTI chairman and then, of course, other leadership of the PTI, how will this particular case with the Punjab Chief Minister also play around and factor in the judiciary playing an objective and credible role?
Right. Usually, generally, Sana, it used to be a principle that honorable justices will not even read a newspaper because that could also affect their judgment or influence them. So in the past, we have heard about instances where there was zero exposure to media just to ensure that the purity of thought and their work remains intact. But these are modern times. Social media is always in your face. Television is in your face. So what happens is that these things actually reach them. And if I'm not forgetting the Honorable Justice, one of the justices, if not Chief Justice of Pakistan, said that they also follow social media. So because of that, they must be cognizant of whatever was actually reported or whatever leak actually appeared, and that usually can technically impact somebody or influence or affect their ability to take risk on certain matters. But having said that, one aspect that is interesting, because your earlier question was about forensic analysis, and it reminded me of not the question but the whole debate. Actually, it reminded me of a 50-50 clip or skit in which policeman is actually searching a car. Within car, he has issue with a toy gun, that why is it there, and he's confiscating it, and the person who is sitting is urging him to let him go, and then the camera actually zooms out, and it is shown that on top of that car there is actually a big gun, right? It is placed there and nobody is noticing it. You need forensic, and by the way, forensic analysis is a simple thing. You have to connect cause and effect, right? You have to ensure the causal chain is intact. If you can do that, if you have the technology, there's nothing difficult in that. And I believe that even in the age of deep fakes, there's enough technology to actually understand. Actually, there is, thanks to AI's presence, there is a capacity to totally judge in very minute details of whether the voice belongs to some person or not. Having said that, you need that when the other person is denying it, right? Like Imran Khan Saab's private leaks, at that time his contention was not that why was this leak actually, this is not me. He was saying, look, this is very bad thing. Why are you releasing it to the younger lot? It will have negative consequences or impact on their minds, right? Because it is so-called vulgar. Similarly, before coming here, I stumbled upon a statement coming from Chaudhry Parvez Elahi that was in Tikka, that there was nothing wrong in those clips. Nothing wrong was said here, in those clips. So the implication is that, of course, he's owning up his own part. If that is so, you don't need forensic analysis of his side. The other two parties, because they can't actually come on television, they cannot issue a statement, there will be a need to check whether they are who we are told they are, and because of that, there can be negative consequences, because that kind of shows that there is some kind of influence or some kind of favoritism in certain quarters. That will be a negative thing for the rule of law in this country.
Right, absolutely. And Barrister Safi, before we move on to the next segment, which I'd also request you to stay with us online for, what about the issue of the protective bail? Of course, it has been denied by the Lahore High Court, and of course, the issue of in-person appearances being emphasized upon now for the PTI chairman with regards to various cases that are going on. In terms of course, the exemptions given in the past, there were, of course, numerous occasions on which he had been given the pre-arrest bail. But now moving forward, how do you think this is going to evolve, and whether or not the PTI chairman will be given any more exemptions?
I would honestly hope that he's not given any more exemptions, and I say this once again as a lawyer because none of my clients are given exemptions. This is an ongoing problem within Pakistan, and it goes both ways. Firstly, Section 380 of the CRPC mandates that in a criminal case, the accused must appear in person. Now, the judge may give exemptions based on certain issues such as health or sometimes like strikes or something of the sort. These things continue to happen, but most often they do not. And in some very, very big cases, so for instance, we have seen, just to give an example, cases of Nawaz Sharif, cases of Zardari, none of them were given exemptions. None of them. They all had to appear before the court. And perhaps one of the reasons why the courts continue to maintain this necessity of appearance is to establish that nobody is above the law. That if the court calls, then you must attend to the court. You cannot whimsically dismiss it away by stating that you are too big a leader to appear before a small court. That's one aspect of the story. The other aspect of the story is, of course, the failing of the law itself. Because in today's time and age, there is no real requirement to appear physically. An online appearance should suffice. Why I say this is because sometimes hearings are taking place from faraway places, A lot of my clients, for instance, are from Karachi. They have to travel to Islamabad regularly for these court hearings. I, for one, dislike it tremendously because they have to spend heavy amounts of money in traveling back and forth from Islamabad very, very often.
Hmm.
And so I also continue and maintain that in this time and age, if the purpose of Section 380 was just to ensure that a person does not run away, he's not an absconder, that he's showing his respect to the court and stating that he is willing to participate in the legal process. It's very
Right.
easy to do that now via digital means. It's no longer necessary to be physically there. But unfortunately, since we have not updated the law, and Imran Khan and his government misuse this law perhaps more than anyone else, they continue to force everyone to come to the court using this very same section. I remember the prosecution back in the day, how they made everyone come, and why this is important is because the law before Imran Khan's government had become a little lax. The courts had started giving a little bit of a leeway. They would say, all right, fine, if an accused can't come, let them off this time. Exemptions had become the norm.
Okay.
It is he who emphasized, it is his government which emphasized that no, exemption should not be the norm, attendance should be the norm. And I think once again he is fallen into the trap of his own works, the kind of things that
Yes.
he's himself been doing, he is now suffering from. There's nothing else I can say. However, I do feel sorry for him because if even if it were his example, it would continue to have a negative fallout on many other people who are constantly attending the courts and are going through a
All right.
similar process of having to appear physically.
Right, all right. We're now going to be taking a look at, of course, the issue with regards to what is happening in India as well. With reference to, of course, the raids at the offices in BBC by the tax authorities, something I'm sure, Barrister Safi, that you're aware of with regards to the issue of the freedom of journalists and, of course, the freedom of any dissenting voices within the country. They have been shunned in the past, but now this is a foreign media office we're talking about. The authorities, of course, have denied it, but there is a lot of linkage being established, particularly by the opposition parties within India, that this is a brazen attack with regards to the kind of freedom that needs to exist. We know that a lot is in question in terms of what is going on within India, but in particular, when we take a look at these particular measures taken by the authorities, particularly tax authorities against a foreign media office, and then, of course, the linkage with the documentary, The Modi Question, what do you think in terms of the way that this is going to develop in terms of any international reaction to what is going on? Because so far we know that the BBC is complying and that they're saying that they're cooperating with the authorities, but of course the linkage with the documentary is something that is much talked about.
And I once again completely agree with you, Sana. The BBC has been very clear on the fact that they are being targeted. They are complying with the law. They are saying that, once again, as we were just discussing about Imran Khan attending, the BBC is attending all court hearings. They said that they will follow the process of the law, and it is imperative that everyone does so. However, the BBC firmly believes that this is because they have been critical of India's policies. India has fallen down to 142nd number on the freedom of the press in the world. That's actually somewhat below Pakistan, and that is an alarming situation. The BBC has been making documentaries, has also given coverage on the deaths of the protesters during the Punjab riots, and various other things which irk the Indian government. So we know for a fact that Modi and the kind of iron-handed policies that he has going around on Kashmir, uh, and we have seen how he's completely clamped down on all expression and all sorts of freedoms in Kashmir. And we used to talk even earlier, perhaps on your show, about how it will start with Kashmir, but it will go around on the rest of India. If you stay quiet, and how the Indian civil society remained quiet on the matters of Kashmir and on the kind of atrocities that were being carried out in various other areas of India, especially on the eastern sides, the Tripura states. If we see the kind of lack of reaction that the Indian public had, it was only inevitable that many other journalists would be caught. Initially, it was Muslim journalists. We have seen countless crackdowns, countless arrests of many Muslim journalists all across India, which was very unfortunate. And since everybody stayed quiet, now it had to come down to BBC. And
Right.
Perhaps
And
after BBC it would be somebody else. We don't know who it
And
is.
that's an interesting point that you're putting forward with regards to how this is perhaps compounded in terms of the measures taken. And I understand that perhaps it's not just something only relevant to the way that the public within India has reacted, but also how internationally people have reacted. But another important aspect, Farrukh, with regards to this is also the fact that YouTube and Twitter have also conceded with regards to the Modi question not being released. And we've seen in the past also that media platforms have accepted the request made, and they've cited their own policies, of course, within this matter. But when we talk about objectivity and we talked about freedom of journalists and the issue of people having access to anything with regards to the information, shouldn't these platforms also be able to play their own role in this?
All right, Sana, let me remind everybody that while these forums have become public utilities, they also are businesses. Because of that, they have to ensure that they will not be slapped with a ban within India, which is one of the most populous markets in the world. The other most populous market in the world is already closed for their business. So they keep on actually adjusting to the demands of self-censorship, and that has been going on. But having said that, let me first actually also quickly tell everybody, because it is a breaking story, that BBC has just put out a tweet that after 60 hours of so-called text survey, that text survey has ended, and the authorities have vacated the place. Now, the question at this moment is the way, the methodology that was employed in searching for such a place. The tax authorities went and searched their personal mobiles and computers, and apparently they were searching for words like dark money, Benami accounts, and yada yada yada. But when you have the access to all the private communication, you can check whatever you want to. So what exactly does it actually tell you? In the end, because BBC in India is not a corporate entity, it is essentially a media entity, right? If you are doing it, you are basically harassing them. It is like if you go to Paris, Louvre, they have cameras which are not connected with any kind of scanning machine or any device to monitor anything. Why is that? Because they just want to remind you that the authorities are there and you are being watched. Similarly, here too, the whole purpose of opening up an office, two offices of a foreign entity and searching for money is essentially to intimidate people. It is an open secret. But look at how Indian media was reporting it. They were normalizing it. That means that any space for dissent in India is gone. Thanks to Adani's, Ambani's, and others who are friends, all media, houses have been hacked into. They are being controlled, and their, reporters or analysts or anchors who had their own opinion have been booted out.
Right.
So now they end up on YouTube, and that brings us to the question that you raised: how much should these platforms be standing with such people? I think sadly at this moment, the way everyone has been actually giving into India's bullying, I don't think that they will be able to stand with those who are there, and those people, very good people, can very easily be deplatformed.
Right. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Barrister Safi, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Much remains to be seen at what happens in India and, of course, within Pakistan as well. But we'll join you tomorrow at the same time, same channel. See you.